Welcome to the Sunshine Podcast here at Sunshine Free Will Baptist Church. I'm Kenny Hatfield, and I'm joined today by the usual suspects, Lee Green, Levi Johnson, and Pastor Jody Fortner. I think Pastor's got a good topic for us today. He's going to go through. I'm kind of interested in it, share it a little bit with us. And before we dive into his topic, I think mine's semi-related in some ways, but I wanted to take the time, since I get to host every so often, just mention something to the church that I thought was interesting that happened this week. Now, we're recording this on July the 22nd, but this week there was interesting news that came out in the church. Just we've seen a lot going on over the last few years, and kind of what we've mentioned in many of our episodes is we're always talking about discernment, and we're talking about having our eyes open, paying attention, thinking through things. And something that I wanted to mention as it relates to the church and the article that I saw, and I'll try to send that to Levi, so we might link it into it so people can go read it if they'd like. But interesting church-related out in Idaho. I mentioned to the guys here earlier, I think of Idaho as like the western West Virginia because it's kind of a rural state surrounded by some more populated states. And there's a lot of people moving from states out there to Idaho. And that's kind of happening in West Virginia as well. We're seeing people move into West Virginia. And that's all, politically related. It seems like people are moving families from places that they don't want to be anymore and moving into more, let's say, we'll just use the word conservative areas. And there may be people moving to other areas of the country as well. But it seems like there is an influx occurring in many of the more conservative states like Florida and Texas and Tennessee. And we don't get into politics much on here, but I think this is something that I just wanted to mention. There is a church out in Idaho that in the height of the COVID panic and lockdowns and all the things that were going on, they decided one day they were going to walk down to City Hall and sing psalms out in the public square. And they announced this, and I guess as a way to restrict them in some way, they put these little dots on the road and said, if you're going to sing here, you're going to stay socially distanced. And if you don't, there will be repercussions. And so they came down, they sang some songs, and then a few people stopped being socially distant, apparently, and they got arrested. After they got arrested, they were put in jail for several days, as I understand it, and charges were pressed. And then, of course, as things were appealed and countersuits were put in place, and this all kind of shook out this week, and it moved to a higher court, they ended up ruling in favor of the church, or the people that were arrested, I guess we'll say the members of that church that were there, that their First Amendments and their Fourth Amendment rights were violated. I just bring that up because I don't want to always come out as like anti-government, but we've got to be paying attention to what's going on. And I've said it before. I've said it in the pulpit. I've said it probably on here. I've heard Pastor allude to something along this lines, but I fully anticipate that we will be able to be arrested just for telling someone about Jesus in our lifetimes. And maybe that sounds crazy, but these people were singing psalms on the public square in Idaho and got arrested and put in jail for it. And this isn't Canada. This isn't, Europe. This happened in our country, in the United States of America. And I think that that's just the most absurd thing. And unfortunately, it seems like more and more that less and less people in our government follow Christ. I guess I can say it that way. I don't know what a better way to say it, and then the people who make the laws and the people who make the decisions and the people who appoint people, they're appointing people that are not Christians. And then what you have is immoral laws, immoral principles, I guess, being applied. I'm thankful that in this case, the Constitution that was based in Christianity 250 years ago won out, and these people were not locked up forever. But more and more, the people that are even in those positions, those judge-appointed positions, I think it's important that we do what we can to influence the government, and the options that we have are either run for government positions that are out there or vote. And that's really kind of what we have. We're not going to be violent. We're not going to be doing things as Christians. We're not going to be doing those types of things. But the influence that we have is that we need to make sure that we're looking through the lens of Scripture in all parts of our life, even in the political sphere, whether we want to go down that path or not. and influence those that are being put in. I know that Pastor has reached out to our public officials. I've reached out to our public officials. I encourage you to reach out to public officials whenever something comes up that it can be something that you disagree with, but you can also send a word of encouragement to them to thank them for the decision that they made. And so anyway, I just wanted to kind of mention that it's here in our country that Christians are being arrested for singing psalms. Now, I know they were arrested for not social distancing is really what happened, but that's absurd to me. So anyway, I'll pass it on to Pastor. It's not directly related to what he has, but I know what he's going to talk about, and I think about the government, and I think about how they work, and I know his topic's more along the lines of science, but I think about science and how they get funded. I mean, we've watched these COVID things that have happened over the last few years. How did they do all the things that they were trying to do so fast? The government gave them billions of dollars to help them to do these things. And so a lot of science that we see and a lot of science that we get is funded by the government. So the government, God is above the government, and God puts these people in place, and he always has a reason for things, and things are going to always work out for his good. At the same time, that doesn't mean that we just sit back and take it. I think we have a place to influence as much as we can. And so anyway, I've preached enough here at the first intro into this. I'll pass it over to Pastor Jody and see what he has for us today.
Yeah, thanks, Brother Kenny. And I think it was a really good introduction, because what we're going to talk about today is a couple of topics related to science, but it's really about institutions and our vigilance as believers and how those things affect us. Brother Kenny used the word influence. And as believers, we're not to be influenced by the world. We're actually to influence the world with Christ and our salvation that we have through Christ. So having said that, if you know me here at the church, you know that I'm a bivocational pastor. I work full-time, also pastor. And as a training vocation, I'm a registered nurse. So I'm going to kind of intro with there's a case study when I was a nursing student that we had to look at, and it's really affected me. I still remember it to this day. And it had to do with someone who was a Seventh-day Adventist, and I think this is hypothetical, but their child in a bad car accident needed a blood transfusion, but their belief was, we cannot receive a blood transfusion. That was their core faith beliefs. They could not do that. And so you're left with an ethical dilemma as a nurse, as a medical community. What do you do? Because you know if you give the blood, it saves the child's life, but the parents have the decision-making point. And so what you do, and what it was trying to teach us in the medical community, was people have faith beliefs that we have to respect. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to do something because of their faith beliefs. It means that they have the right to choose to do nothing because of their faith beliefs, which means we don't intervene. So that's kind of what shaped my thoughts about medicine and about caring for people, and above all, do no harm. So there's instances where we do nothing. And what that means is, some people say, well, the parents killed their child. No, the parents allowed the natural process to occur without intervention from somebody else. And, families in the church deal with this too. They have loved ones who, are critically ill and maybe on ventilators or on life support, and then they're left with a decision. What do we do? Do we have to continue on? And they feel like, if I remove them from this thing that's keeping them alive, then I'm killing them. These are things that our families deal with. I hope that today will kind of just help us in taking a fresh look at these institutions that we once have trusted, and maybe we should have been questioning all along, but at least we should take a fresh look at some of the things they're saying, some of the things they're doing. So two instances, there's really two things that I'm going to talk about from a scientific happening, something in science that's happening, and then what does that affect on us in our biblical beliefs? The first is related to something called geoengineering. Now, geoengineering, big fancy term, but it's something that's really been happening for a while. People who have thought this was happening have been called conspiracy theorists, but now it's open that people in the government are actually considering openly doing more and more of this geoengineering. What is geoengineering? It's trying to control the weather, trying to control the temperature. So blocking the sun to keep it from warming the earth, because there's a thought that there's like global warming. And so we need to correct that ourselves. And so how can we do that? Increase the clouds, reflect the sun. If you've heard people talk about chemtrails, the things that you see in the sky, when I was a kid, I remember seeing one every once in a while, and I thought it was just a jet that would go by. And now there's all kinds of these things in the sky. And so what we find out is there's actually studies that are happening where they're trying to do things to influence the weather on the earth. To me, that is absolutely scary. That we are consciously and intentionally trying to control the weather, what we would say nature, but we know that God is the one who put things in nature. The other thing I want to talk about is I had read an article, and I've shared this with a couple people in the church, where the science community has now created a human synthetic embryo. A human synthetic embryo. No sperm, no egg. It was synthetically created. Now, it's not been allowed to mature, to grow, to come into a human form. They're studying certain processes that happen within this embryo for scientific reasons, that they say. For me, as a pastor, this is concerning, that we would somehow try to create a human being on our own without any process that we would call natural. And so what got me thinking about this, and then I'll pass it over to you all for thoughts. What does that do to our heart when we think as humans we can control the weather? What does it do to our heart when we as humans think that we are in control of what the forecast is going to be or what we want it to be? Where are we at in our hearts when we think that we can create humans without any process of nature taking place because we have that knowledge, we have grown to that part? And so I began to think about the account of Moses and where he was trying to get Pharaoh to let the people go out of Egypt. And if you remember that account, God sent Moses, and Moses originally, he didn't feel worthy to go. And so God, tells him to go. And God is going to do some signs through Moses to convince Pharaoh to let the people go. And there's going to be what we would call the 10 plagues. And early on in the 10 plagues, and you can look at this in the book of Exodus chapter 7, the book of Exodus chapter 8, Moses would perform a certain miracle. He would tell Pharaoh, let the people go, we're going to go worship, and he would do a sign, a miraculous sign. God would through Moses. And then the magicians in Egypt would do the same thing. The same thing Moses did, they did. And the Bible says that Pharaoh's heart was hardened. So when he saw the miraculous thing Moses did, I'm led to believe that his heart was possibly softened, receptive to the message that Moses would have. But once the magicians were able to do the exact thing that Moses did, his heart was hardened, and he said, no, I won't let the people go. And that goes on. It didn't happen once. It happened several times. And then it gets to the point that Pharaoh's heart is hardened even when the magicians couldn't do the same thing that Moses did. And it was hardened because he pleaded with Moses to tell God to stop, to take it. Moses would do that. And then once the relief came, his heart was hardened because of that too. But it started because he was able to see the magicians do and have technically, and I'm using air quotes here, the same power that the God of Moses had. And when they saw that, his heart was hardened. And this is where I want to hand it off and get some feedback. When we see institutions, and in this case it's a scientific community, when we see them say we have the same control, the same power, we figured this out, we have the same, I'm going to say power, that God has had all of these years, the whole time the earth has been in existence, we now know how to bring the temperature down. We now know how to create rain. We now know how to create humans. We don't even need a male and a female to come together. We can do it on our own without any intervention, without any help. What does that do, first of all, to the hearts of believers? And then second of all, does that not cause us to pause and really consider what else is happening in this community? What else are they doing? And where should I be getting my guidance from?
So before we go into that, I just have a question. I want to make sure that I'm clear in understanding. I thought I read everything, but I read them a while back, so maybe I forgot it. Are you saying that they are creating people without a egg and a sperm?
Correct.
Do they go into any explanation of that?
So they have evidently been doing this for a while with animals, but the animals have never been able to mature to actually come into being, to actually become an animal, just in the embryo stage, because there's always been something that would fall apart, in the process later on.
So they are trying to get them to mature. They haven't.
In animals. In humans, they say this was a very small window that they're looking at to understand the embryo growth. Mm-hmm. As a Christian community, it brings into question what we've always been talking about with abortion. When does life begin? Right? And so it's not when the birth happens or the baby, is out of the womb. We believe that it happens at creation. At the moment things are fertilized, it begins to grow. That's life. And I'll say this, just in my time as a nurse and everything, other countries have always done some things that the United States would not do. We had a different kind of moral, ethical guideline. But these are things that are happening here in our country.
I know one of those things that's almost leading to with the embryos is they're also working on artificial wombs, finding a way to grow a baby in its entire gestation without the use of a natural womb, which opens the door to even more concerning issues as well. Dr. Stephen Meyer, from head of the intelligent design community, they work with people of all different faiths or no faiths that believe that there's enough evidence to point to a designer, not necessarily pointing to which designer, although he himself is a Christian. But they're trying to create a scientific base to point to the creator. One of the things he talks a lot about is what's called the philosophy of science. And in the past 30 decades or so, the philosophy of science has been pushed aside. And what that is, we talk about science, you think of the experiments, you think of the theories and stuff like that. The philosophy of science is the background of why and how you do science. That incorporates the ethics of it, the consideration of the impacts of what you do and why you should or should not do it. And then also stuff about logic and math and stuff that science doesn't actually deal with. Science can't tell you anything about the ethics of something that's outside of science. You have to have logic in place before you can do science. Science doesn't prove logic. Logic is the basis of science. So there are things science can't do. And so when it comes to the philosophy of science, that's been pushed aside with this push for, well, science is the answer to everything. And we call that scientism. Science is the belief that you should have about the world. If science doesn't answer it, then it's not something you should take seriously. The problem is ethics is a thing that science cannot talk to. Science can only be done with ethics in mind. You think of Nazi Germany, they did some horrible experiments on the Jews and other prisoners they had. They did experiments on patients that were awake. They would test the strength or the endurance of a human while they were alive under extreme torturous situations. And then they record the results. We've used that information to be better at medicine and stuff like that. So I guess it somehow had a good impact, but at the cost of the Holocaust. Now that we're in this scientistic view that science is the be-all and end-all of everything, that gets you in the weeds ethically and morally. And also, like Pastor said, it cripples your view of God's place in behind it all.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
I'm kind of taking all that in. It's very interesting. from both of you. I will say one thing. I guess I'll add this. You all may have seen this in the last few weeks, but I was unaware, I guess, exactly of the understanding of how they were doing that. But again, this is all over my head. Science was my least favorite subject in school, and apparently recently they have figured out a way, and by they I mean the scientists that have been working on this, to develop meat. Have you guys seen that? Where they are, I don't know exactly what meats. I don't know if it's trying to be like hamburger or steaks or chicken. Maybe it was chicken. I think is that the only one they're doing? Or they're going to try to do all of it. I mean, let's be clear. But they've also been approved, I think, to even sell it.
Oh, the FDA?
Yeah, the FDA approved that. So I can't grasp that exactly. I don't know what that means. I can think of a lot of negatives from everything we're talking about. Now, someone could throw up, well, if you can just make meat, I don't know if it's cheaper than like raising a chicken, well, then we can just feed all the people in Africa that don't have food. I don't know. It's just very spiritually, this is something that you guys are presenting it today, or you presenting it today and just kind of thinking through it. It's concerning on one level, and then I don't know all the ins and outs having kind of just received it, but
it does kind of bring up questions like just thinking of a common person. You're not involved in scientific experimentation or anything. You benefit from what they do, and then you just kind of go on with your life. But
right.
You really don't think about any of the implications that it has maybe on the everyday life. For most people, it wouldn't. You wouldn't think two thoughts about it. But it is, I guess, an authority that you're listening to or learning from or gaining from. And just like any other authority, it's important to know where that's coming from and how it lines up with your convictions, I guess.
And to your point about the chicken, I think all of this feeds together. It's not just the embryo. It's not just the son. It's all of these things that are coming down that says we no longer need God. Like, I don't need God to create an animal because I can create the meat myself. In Scripture, and even in our nation's history, we had a lot of farmers, and people grow crops. And what would they do? They would till the land. They did what they knew to do. Plant the seeds, they would water, but then they would pray because it would be God that would give the increase, right? They were dependent upon God for these things to grow. And now we're evolving into a community that says, we've got this. We don't need God. We can do the weather. We can create humans. We can create meat. We can sustain ourselves without God. And that's the concern.
Reminds me of that joke about scientists telling God, we have all of the technology and the knowledge now. We can create life on our own without the need of a divine creator. And so God puts them up to challenges. Okay, let's go ahead. And so the scientists start digging up the dirt and everything. And God says, no, wait. Get your own dirt. I made that dirt.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
I haven't really had much to say on this. I'm just kind of sitting here taking it all in. But the one thought that just keeps going through my mind is that it's scary when humans are trying to be bigger than God. And that just baffles me. It scares me.
Again, as I'm sitting here kind of listening to this, I do this, I think, better now than I have in the past. I try to think about, what are they thinking? Whether they think it or not, are they thinking, we don't need God? Are they thinking that? Are they thinking this is going to be great to help people? I think a lot of people have done things, just as Levi pointed out, thinking that they were going to somehow help people in some way or help their people in some way that ended up turning out horrific. I used to be really set in like, my opinion is the opinion, right? Like it's not opinion, it's fact, and that's not a good way to be on anything, I don't think. I've learned kind of from Darcy's school, something that I've kind of taken away from that is I read some of the books that she's going to read over the next 10 or so years. And I'm like, why are they reading these things? So I started kind of looking into that and asking some questions. And they're reading books that are like from secular authors and all these things. And I'm like, I don't get why we're reading this stuff. This is a Christian school, and I'm sure other people have thought the same thing. And then kind of the answer was, well, any good army knows their enemy. And if you don't know who the enemy is, then you don't know what you're up against. And so the idea is that you read these authors, you read these secular authors, you read the viewpoints of these people that have written different things, and then you discern what it is it's trying to say, so that you can then, from a godly or biblical viewpoint, you can see the bad in what's being written there, as opposed to just absorbing it and taking it in as if it's the gospel in some way. You can poke holes in what they're saying and maybe help others even see that as well. So that kind of got me to where I try to do that now too. I can still get, worked up about some things and think that what I think is right. But then when I sit down and try to think through things logically and think through things biblically, and as I'm thinking through this, I agree with everything that you've said. I don't know what their view is. That's one thing I don't know. But it is all concerning. But I don't want to be throwing up emergency flares myself without having a better understanding of it all. So this is something I'm definitely interested in, that I've got to kind of look into a little bit more, all of it, all the aspects of it, because as I mentioned on everything, I'm always trying to help my kids understand things and walk through things. Well, if I don't understand it, then I can't help them walk through it.
No, and that's a fair point too, that I don't want to demonize the scientists or anybody that's doing, some of these things, with the exception of the embryo. I'm very concerned about that.
Yeah, that would be too.
But because you can't know intentionality. I don't know what their intentions are in doing this. It could be very well to, try to help people. I guess the concern is, as an observer of these things, we need to guard ourselves lest we begin in our own hearts to begin to think, oh, we've kind of got a backup, right? If something really bad happens, we really don't need God because we can make our own chicken. If something really bad happens. And so instead of having a complete dependence upon God, we have this kind of safety net, we think, and then that hinders our own hearts towards worship.
And you could have people that would try to argue that somehow these are blessings from God, that God has given the scientists the ability to know this and do this. So it's very interesting. It is concerning and confusing. So there's a lot there, I think. All right. Well, I appreciate Pastor leading us through that. And I guess we'll take a break and go to Levi's dreaded fun thing.
We thank you for listening to the first half of the podcast and hope you stick around for the fun thing. If you'd like to stop by and see us, we're located at 2111 James River Road in Huntington. You can visit our website at sunshinechurchwv.org for a sneak peek of what our church is about. You can listen to sermons, post questions, and learn about the Stand to Reason outpost there too. There's also Friday morning fellowship. There's yummy food there. Well, I've talked long enough. Time to get back to the show. Hit it, Levi.
All right, we have now returned, and now it's the dreaded fun thing, I think you said.
Yeah, that's the new name.
And we're going to do everybody's favorite game.
I knew it.
Where's the Bible verse? This one's the Magic Edition. So Pastor Jody talked about the example of magicians mimicking the miracles of God and connected it to things in science now. And so I went through and searched for the word magic and didn't get much. So I expanded it. So we're going to look at verses that have the word magic or magicians or some synonym thereof. But the new catch for this first time, second season of Where's the Bible Verse, we will be using the English Standard Version, the ESV, so it might be a little trickier if you're used to our King James version of the game, or the KJVVG. Just to refresh our contestants and our audience, Where's the Bible Verse is a regular game we play here on the Sunshine Podcast, developed by my son Samuel and me for our bedtime devotions. I'll read out a Bible verse, typically themed with the topic of the episode. Each participant in turn gets a chance to guess the book, chapter, and verse where the scripture passage comes from. They get 1 point each for naming the correct book, chapter number, or verse number. But if they miss any of those, the next player in line gets a chance to guess until all three have gone. The player with the most points at the end of the game gets a special prize. And what is our prize, Johnny? Oh, wait, we don't have a Johnny. We also don't have a prize. But you get bragging rights, I guess. I'm going to let this fancy random picker choose who goes first, and that was a thing I did on the computer. And we'll go in a counterclockwise circle from then. And it looks like Kenny is first to bat. So here we go. You ready?
No.
Good. But there was a man named Simon who had previously practiced magic in the city and amazed the people of Samaria, saying that he himself was somebody great.
I'm going to say Matthew. I went with my second guess, so I'm going to go Matthew. I don't know why I did that. 13:5.
No.
Okay.
For the steal, Jody?
I'm going to guess Acts 16:4.
It is Acts.
That was my first guess.
Lee, for the final steal?
12:11.
No, it is Acts 8:9. So that's 1 point for Jody. And now it's your turn to guess, Jody. Therefore, thus says, I was about to say saith, but I forgot I meant is. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, behold, I am against your magic bands with which you hunt the souls like birds, and I will tear them from your arms, and I will let the souls whom you hunt go free, the souls like birds.
Old Testament?
Yes, I forgot.
Oh, I forgot about
you do
hints
have
too.
hints.
Oh my gosh.
5 seconds.
1 Samuel 3:8.
No, no, and no. Lee?
Let's go 1 Kings 3:8.
Nope. No, and no. You should have guessed different chapter and verse because his
Ah,
chapter
true.
and verse are
Yeah.
wrong. You could have gotten maybe a point.
Yeah, didn't think about that.
2 Samuel 5:10.
Nope. It was Ezekiel 13:20.
Ezekiel.
Just for help, anytime you hear a lot of stuff like, I'm against you, I will tear them from your arms, Ezekiel's a very negative book because there's a lot of judgment in that book. So that's a good place to start. I learned that from reading it last year. I was like, man, he is mad. Okay, Lee. Then the magician said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. But Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them as the Lord had said.
Exodus chapter 8, verse 3.
It is Exodus 8,
Good job.
but not in the 3.
15.
Nope.
8.
Nope. Exodus 8:19. 2 points for Lee.
Good
That's
job.
rare.
Even a broken clock strike twice a day.
All right, Kenny. A bribe is like a magic stone in the eyes of the one who gives it. Wherever he turns, he prospers.
I feel like I'm going to score 0 today.
Don't forget hints, too.
Oh, yeah. New Testament?
Nope.
Okay. I'll say Proverbs 10:10.
It is Proverbs.
Good job. Oh, Proverbs 3:8.
It is verse 8.
Oh.
Chapter 12.
Chapter 17. Proverbs 17:8.
Good job.
Fun fact, a bribe is like a magic stone in ESV, and then the KJV was a bribe is like a precious stone. I thought that was interesting.
Interesting.
Your turn, I think. Pastor's turn. The captain of 50 and the man of rank, the counselor and the skillful magician, and the expert in charms. It's not even an actual sentence. It's
That's what I was thinking.
something in the previous verse probably led into that. So
Never read a Bible verse.
exactly.
Old Testament,
Yes.
1 Kings 8:10.
Nope.
2 Kings 7:15.
Nope.
Do I get a hint?
Yeah.
Is there
you did
secondary
get,
hints?
You did get progressive hints, yeah.
Okay. Look at that.
But you only have 10 seconds.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, no. Now I'm like,
A
Phil
very
Pressure.
liberal 10 seconds.
I don't even know what to ask. I just got my hint. I'm happy having the hint.
And 10 seconds is up. Next.
I'll say, okay, since I've went well past, I want to ask for the hint. I don't even remember what you said now. I'm going to say,
Remember a band of 50?
let's just say 2 Chronicles 5:12.
Nope. It is Isaiah 3:3.
I thought about Isaiah, but I was like, that's not right.
All right. Lee. But Elymas the magician, for that is the meaning of his name, opposed them, seeking to turn the proconsul away from the faith.
Is it Old Testament?
No,
Acts 11:17.
it is Acts.
13:7.
It is 13. Acts 13.
10.
Acts 13:8. You almost had it.
I need those guessing
Guess
points.
right. Don't we all?
Okay, Kenny.
Oh, yeah.
Then the magicians, the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers came in, and I told them the dream, but they could not make known to me its interpretation.
Moses?
No.
Oh.
I thought you were guessing the book of Moses. I was like, finally.
No.
The book of Hezekiah.
Oh. Okay, hold on. Oh, gosh. Okay, now my mind's... Your head nodding is stressing me out. 1 Kings 6:3.
You guys are liking the Kings and Chronicles today. No.
Daniel
Yeah.
Oh.
4:6.
It is Daniel 4.
Daniel 4:3.
No, it is Daniel 4:7. You guys,
I was going to go 7. But why? Anyways.
I see that you guys in the past time we haven't been recording have been reading the Bible because you're getting closer than ever. All right.
Cheaters.
I would have gotten Daniel.
Cheaters, you've been reading the Bible.
How dare you?
All right, Pastor. So in the morning his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was none who could interpret them to Pharaoh.
1 Kings 16:20.
Nope.
Exodus 17:13.
Nope.
Moses?
Yes.
Still want to get it wrong. Genesis. Like, way up there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think how far it is without going over.
It's not Price is Right. So
Yeah, I know. Let's just say, like, I don't know, this might not be high enough, but I'm going to say like 23:12.
Nope. It is Genesis 41:8.
I
Got
should
one.
have.
So you got the
Genesis,
book for...
though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Got the book
who calling for the magicians of Egypt, telling Pharaoh's dreams? That's involving what patriarch? Anybody know? No extra points for it, but
Oh, then I'm not going to get
who is interpreting dreams for Pharaoh?
Joseph.
Joseph.
Joseph. There you
Joseph.
go.
That's I thought the last one was Joseph. That's why I said
You make
Moses.
it sound so easy.
Yeah.
And Genesis ends with the death of Joseph, right?
Yeah.
So it's 41. There's 50 chapters in Genesis. So just to guide you for further.
Yes.
All right, last one.
Lee.
When they had gone through the whole island as far as Paphos, they came upon a certain magician, a Jewish false prophet named Bar-Jesus.
Acts 17:12.
It is Acts.
18:13.
Nope.
10:20.
Nope. It is Acts 13:6.
Good job. We had like 3 acts. I think.
Yeah.
3 or 4.
There were not a lot of the word magic in there, and the word science wasn't in there, other than one in the actual Greek. Scientia is in there. But there we go. Let's see. Let's tally up the scores. We have, for the first time in Sunshine Podcast Where's the Bible Verse history, we have a tie. Kenny has 3. Lee and Pastor Jody have 4. This is a tight game and a high-scoring game for us. So
4 was...
4 is a high score.
These guys could guess numbers good.
Guess being the operative word.
Yes. But it does seem I see a lot of improvement since the last time, so that's promising. Maybe you just like the magic parts of the Bible better.
Maybe there's fewer magic parts of the Bible. So
It's good to hear the pastors reading the Bible now.
Finally.
you've been doing good lately. I should have said that. Cut that out.
So let's do a tiebreaker.
I like a tie.
Yeah, I like
Good
a tie.
fellowship. Good
Yes.
fellowship.
No. Tiebreaker.
If
You're dividing us. You're putting us against each other.
Exactly.
you play to win the game. Herman Edwards, New York Jets.
This one's from the King James Version.
So is this Jody's?
Just have him say it first. Is it going to be like very common?
Let's say who says it first.
Okay.
All right. Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world.
Paul?
No.
Oh, can we ask a hint? That's what I was doing. I didn't think it was the book of Paul. I always have to clarify.
Samuel will get on you for it. Either way. No, it is not Paul.
Jude 1:7.
Nope.
Does that mean Lee wins, or he has to get a point?
He has to at least get something.
John 7:1.
You got the verse. It is verse 1. 1 John 4:1.
John.
How did I lose to verse 1? How did I lose to verse 1?
By a technicality,
It was Peter?
Lee wins. 1 John 4:1.
First John.
Yeah.
I was thinking John or 1st, 2nd, 3rd John. I'm like, so I thought, well, maybe if it's 1st or 2nd, 3rd John, maybe John will at least get me a point out of that. I don't know.
So there we go. That's the end of this episode. We hope you stick around and come back for the next one. Make sure to send us any questions you might have, and we hope you enjoyed it. So you're saying he has a good topic this time.
Yeah.
As I kind of did the other one.
I did that on purpose, actually.